What if the smallest Avenger took down the biggest threat in the universe? In an unimaginable battle of size versus power, Ant-Man does the unthinkable. He shrinks Galactus. Witness the epic clash that defies logic. As a mere human rewrites the fate of the cosmos, get ready for a mind-blowing showdown. The sky split apart as the Devourer arrived. Galactus descended from a void like an ancient force beyond reckoning, his immense form blotting out the stars. He was neither a being nor a conqueror. He was inevitability, a force as relentless as time itself. Planets had crumbled at his presence. Civilizations erased in the wake of his hunger. Earth trembled beneath his arrival. Cities shuddered as the weight of his presence bent the very fabric of gravity. He did not land. He did not need to. He simply was, existing beyond the reach of ordinary understanding. His armor, a lattice of cosmic metals forged in the birth of galaxies, pulsed with unreadable energy. His eyes, twin abysses of endless hunger, swept across the planet below with neither rage nor mercy, only the cold attachment of God that consumed without question. Ant-Man stood among the chaos, his mind barely able to grasp the scale of what he was witnessing. He had fought giants before. He had shrunk into dimensions smaller than atoms. But nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing could. Galactus was not merely large. He was existence itself given form. To challenge him was to challenge reality. And yet he had no choice. Fear was useless. Panic was death. The world had mere minutes before the process began. Galactus did not destroy planets in rage or hatred. He consumed them like a man drinking water, effortless, unthinking, necessary. The siphoning mechanisms would activate soon, drawing Earth's life force into his eternal hunger. There was no fighting him. No force in the universe had truly defeated Galactus. Some had deterred him, tricked him, made bargains, but no one had ever undone his hunger. But Ant-Man wasn't trying to defeat him in battle. He wasn't Thor, who would strike with lightning, nor Hulk, who would punch with infinite fury. His power lay elsewhere, in something so small it was often overlooked. Size. It had always been his greatest weapon. He had shrunk beyond the subatomic, entered realms where time and space folded into nothingness. He had grown into a titan, dwarfed only by those beyond comprehension. If there was any weapon left against Galactus, it wasn't strength, it was scale. A mad thought formed. Could he shrink Galactus? The idea was absurd, laughable even. The Devourer of Worlds was beyond matter, beyond physics as he understood it. And yet, Scott Lang had spent his life doing the impossible with Pym particles. If it worked on a battlefield, if it worked in the quantum realm, then why not here? But he needed to get inside. His mind raced. The body of Galactus was no simple construct. He was both matter and energy, a living cosmos encased in flesh. But where there was life, there was vulnerability. If he could shrink from within, bypassing the cosmic defenses that made him untouchable, then maybe, just maybe, this insane plan could work. With a deep breath, Scott activated his suit, triggering a controlled shrink. The world around him expanded as he plummeted toward the Colossus. If he failed, there would be no second attempt. Galactus did not move. He did not need to acknowledge something so insignificant. To him, Ant-Man was less than a grain of sand in a storm. It was his very insignificance that allowed Scott to slip through. He aimed for a fissure in the cosmic armor, an imperfection, perhaps a seam where energies converged. As he shrank further, his perception of reality warped. The surface of Galactus was no longer solid metal, but something deeper, something alive. He was falling not into a body, but into an entire universe wrapped within flesh. Then he was inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the world changed. Gone was the sky. Gone was the earth. He was in a realm unlike any he had ever encountered, a place where the boundaries of biology and cosmic energy blurred. He floated in a vast, swirling void, where luminous currents pulsed like the veins of a god. The scale was incomprehensible. It was as though he had shrunk into an entire galaxy, suspended within the living machinery of Galactus himself. Here, physics no longer obeyed the laws of man. Structures that resembled organs stretched across the expanse, yet they were not flesh. They were conduits of power, threading energy from the very stars he had devoured. and Galactus had defenses. It started as a pulse, a deep, resonating tremor that rippled through the space inside the Titan. Then came the first wave. They were not creatures, nor were they machines. They were manifestations of his very being, cosmic antibodies responding to the intrusion. Swarms of glowing constructs, shaped like fractal spirals, descended upon him, their forms shifting unpredictably as they closed in. Scott evaded them, shrinking further into the microscopic spaces between their movements. But they adapted, their speed matching his shifts, as if reality itself bent to Galactus's will. He had to be faster, darting to the chaotic expanse. He navigated a storm of defenses, diving deeper into the Titan's core. The further he went, the more impossible the landscape became. Threads of energy pulse in patterns he could barely comprehend. Pathways of pure cosmic force intertwining like the roots of a celestial tree. If he'd been anyone else, if he had been merely human, his mind would have shattered at the sight. But he pressed on. At last he saw it. The core. It was not a heart, not an organ in the way earthly beings possessed. It was a nexus, the singular point where the unfathomable power of Galactus converged. A sphere of pure cosmic energy, shifting between forms, radiating destruction and creation in equal measure. Scott knew that if he was going to shrink Galactus, it had to start here. The PIM particles had to be introduced at the source, disrupting the very foundation of his cosmic mass. He reached for the device strapped to his suit, a specially designed PIM particle emitter. It was a desperate modification, one built on calculations that barely made sense even to him. It didn't matter. This was his only chance. The core pulsed, sensing his presence. It fought back. The universe within Galactus convulsed as the very fabric of space turned against him. Gravity twisted, time fragmented. The Titan was reacting, his body understanding the threat in ways no mortal mind could grasp. Scott had no time. With the last of his strength, he activated the emitter. The effect was instantaneous. A violent shockwave rippled outward as the PIM particles spread through the core. The sphere of energy shuddered, its form distorting as the molecular integrity of Galactus began to shift. From the outside, the impossible unfolded. The great Titan, the Devourer of Worlds, the force that had consumed galaxies, began to shrink. Galactus roared, his voice reverberating across the stars, a sound that defied mortal understanding. His immense form trembled as his cosmic essence compressed. His armor buckled. The sky itself seemed to warp as the once godly entity was reduced, condensed, trapped in a body far smaller than before. He was no longer infinite, no longer unshakable. And in the vastness of space, Scott Lang, exhausted and barely able to stand, gazed at what remained. Galactus, the Devourer, was now the size of a man, and for the first time in eternity, he was powerless. The cosmos stood still. The being who had once towered over planets, who had consumed civilizations without remorse, was now reduced to a mere fragment of his former self. He knelt in the ruins of his own existence, his armor dull, his power fractured. The hunger that had driven him for eons flickered weakly, no longer an unquenchable force, but a distant whisper. Scott Lang, exhausted beyond measure, hovered above him, staring in disbelief. His body ached from the impossible feat he had just accomplished, but his mind reeled even more. Galactus was still Galactus, still a god in essence, but now bound by limits he had never known. Could he still devour? Could he still destroy? Scott didn't know. But for now, for the first time in existence, Galactus was small. The Titan turned his gaze upward, his cosmic eyes still burning with knowledge beyond mortal comprehension. Yet, beneath that, for the first time, there was something else. Not rage, not defiance. Something deeper. Understanding. Galactus did not speak. He did not need to. He simply stood, his new form unfamiliar even to himself, and in a flash of energy, he vanished. Where he had gone, Scott did not know. Perhaps to the edge of the universe, perhaps to a place where he could contemplate the unthinkable. Scott exhaled, looking at the void where the Devourer had stood. He had won. Against all odds, against all logic, he had done the impossible. But deep down, he knew one truth remained. Galactus would return one day, but now, he would no longer look down upon the cosmos. For the first time, he would look at it as an equal. The end.